I think I always start with a little giggle, don't I? Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's Sitting in the Word. And I have two gifts, two presents for you this day, should you choose to accept them. In the Show More area beneath today's video, you'll see links to two songs. One is titled Keep Me Alive, and the other one's titled Runaway. Mark and I were on the phone, I don't know, 3-4 times earlier in the week. It's Friday morning. It's 10 minutes to 8 a.m. and I got up around 2 a.m. Probably be going to bed tonight around 5 or 6 p.m. Somebody asked me to explain this. I thought, well, we'll do it in one of the live streams. My hours are crazy. They've always been crazy. It's just basically a matter of freedom that Abba has given me since I was 16 years old, and I've always had the freedom to go to bed when I'm tired and get up when I'm not, and this is what happens. Anyway, Mark and I were on the phone quite a few times. You remember we started off with 14 reels of tape, all kinds of sizes, formats. He got them all transferred onto a hard disk, and over the weekend, last weekend, he was working with a guy who came up from San Diego especially to do this, and it was, they had 14 files on a hard drive. They didn't, each file represented one reel of tape. Well, they finally got everything over into Mark's studio, into his Pro Tools software, and so now we know that we have 46 songs. That's the total. They did a lot of work. They had songs. They might have had one song, and there was 3 or 4 copies of the song, and they had to use their ears. Sometimes it was 3 or 4 different performances, takes, probably definitely in the same session. So they had to pick the best performance and find the one that was the highest quality audio. That because there were times where you might have had 3 copies and it's the same performance, the same song, but one of them was the master, higher audio quality, and the other 2 or 3 might have just been copies of that one, found on other tapes. Very complicated. So they weeded everything out, and we have 46 individual songs. Now, the curiosity for me is, which songs? Well, Mark sent me 2 MP3s this past week, and these are raw. These are the way that they were from the tape. Like when you play Keep Me Alive, if you really crank it up and listen, before the music starts, you're going to hear a lot of white noise, hissing, and you won't notice it once the song's playing. But when Mark's going to rework Keep Me Alive, and I remember this session very well. It was a wonderful experience. He's going to tweak it up. He's going to remove that white noise. Now when he does, for example, In the second verse I sing, "Oh, they told me I was foolish when I prayed for love to set me on fire, and then they looked at me strange when I showed them I could not tire." When that second verse comes in, there's an organ, and a Hammond organ growling in the background. You can barely notice it, but when Mark takes all that white noise out, and we wind up with the finished copy, and you listen to that and compare it to the one I have for you linked below, you'll be like, wow, what a difference. So when you listen to Keep Me Alive, there's me singing, playing my guitar. There's a good friend of mine, Bob Leapman, playing a mandocello, 8 strings, 4 double strings. But he tuned, if any of you out there know what a mandocello is, Bob tuned his mandocello differently. I believe it was in sort of an open G tuning because it caused the instrument to resonate more than any other way of tuning it. It's a real bright sound, and very, very resonant sound. I always loved when Bob would play along with me. We've got some drums, there's a Hammond organ, and then there was one guy there in the studio played a trumpet. He said, yeah, go ahead, so we did a middle 8 with this guy playing trumpet. The amazing thing, this was 1972. I was 21 years old. It was out at a recording studio called Cherokee Studios, owned by a very famous drummer by the name of Craig Krampf, K-R-A-M-P-F, Krampf. Now, well, I don't know, some 20 years later, Craig moved to Nashville. I was living in Nashville, and he produced Melissa Etheridge's first album. Melissa came to the Bluebird Cafe, was performing one night. I went with some friends from RCA, and we sat right again up front, right up in front of the stage, and Craig came out during one of the songs and played drums. But I knew that he had produced her album, and I was really interested in talking to him about us working together. And the thing I remember, Craig's playing the drums. At one point, he leaned back and played the wall behind him. Craig, he was just so in the zone. He'll play anything, and the wall was there. He played the wall, and then came back in. It's like he's just amazing. Well, I didn't realize it at the time, but I wound up hooking up with Craig. We got together. It turns out Craig owned Cherokee Studios when I recorded Keep Me Alive. Recorded a few other songs there too. One of them I can't wait to hear, called Moon Dog's Eyes. Oh, what a song, and what that was a special moment in the studio. But that was out at Craig's. Now here, Keep Me Alive, I have a bizarre tuning on the guitar. It's tuned from the low E string to the high E string, E, and then the A string I tuned down to an E. That's weird. The D string is down to a B, the G string is down to an E, the B string is up to a G sharp, and the high E string is down to a B. So it's E, E, B, E, G sharp, B. I'm sure I never used that tuning other than in that song. It's just the way it went. But I wrote about this girl named Gail. Gail was from Kentucky, and we dated, I don't know, I would think for maybe less than a year. She was just kind of coming through town. She was going to Rutgers University for a spell, and we spent a lot of time together. She was a sweet girl. Anyway, Keep Me Alive, wrote it about Gail. It's just a fun song. I don't think it really says anything. It was just a fun groove. And then the other song was a year later, 1973. I was back in Jersey for a few months. I remember I was talking to Mark on the phone, and he asked me, he says, "You ever read newspapers?" I was like, "No, never, never." In fact, to this day, I have never, not once, ever read a newspaper. And my dad, he couldn't wait to get his paper, get up in the morning, have his coffee, read his papers. To me, they were boring. There was nothing there I wanted to know about. And Mark was like, "Oh yeah, you want to read the paper, write a song about something, current events." So I listened to him. I guess I grabbed the paper and I read some story about a guy who was being chased by the police. They hadn't caught him yet, but they were chasing him from county to county. And it was an interesting story. I made no note of the guy's name, no note of what he did wrong or anything. I just wrote this song called, "Run away if you can, run away from the man. Throw that gun away from your hand, run, run, run away to the end, you gotta do it, you're in it now." And that was all I had to say about it. And the chord structure is pretty strange. This is one of those songs that a graduate of Juilliard would say to me, "How did you ever think of that?" And my answer would be, I didn't. I just didn't know it was wrong to do. So, anyway, Runaway. I just threw it together. It reminded me of, I was much younger, living on Home Street. I always talk about Home Street. That was the most joyful time of my life. You can see Home Street in one of my personal videos about my Alan's 13th birthday party. You'll see me. All my friends and I are 13. They look 13. I look like I'm 9. I was such a little boy. But back in those days, I might have been around 12 or 13 years old, and we were having a summer barbecue out in our backyard with aunts, uncles, and cousins. We did that a lot in the 50s. Of course, that was probably the early 60s. And this guy came running, really, like full speed. His legs were flying, his arms were, and he scaled over our fence, ran through our yard to the back of the yard, scaled over the next fence, and just before he scaled over the next fence, there were like 2 detectives. One of them's got a gun in his hand up in the air, and they're like scaling the fence. One of them stopped, and I was like, wow, I know that guy. It was Silvio Bayless. So when I sing Runaway, I always think of Silvio. I didn't know Silvio. I knew of Silvio. I think he was 2-3 years older than me. But he was always in trouble. And I talked to Mark about him this week. And Mark says, I knew him. He didn't live far away from me. And he says he was from a good family. Just, anyway, Runaways, the man was chasing him. So here's these 2 songs. These are the first 2 copies of anything that I have, and I'm sharing them with you. They're yours for free. These are roughs. these are the worst condition they could possibly be, and they will be tweaked up, and I don't know what's going to happen later on. But at any rate, I'm sharing everything with you, my chavarim, no charge ever. But then, you know, I guess some packages, I'm leaving that up to Mark. If he wants to put packages together and produce something, I don't know, get record deals, publishing deals, whatever, sell a product, I don't want to have anything to do with that. That's up to him. If he does that, those will be for sale. You want to buy those, you can. But this stuff is yours. So anyway, it's fun. And it's Friday morning, so I imagine I might hear from Mark later with some more good news. I'll share that with you next week. But this is fun stuff. 1972, Keep Me Alive, I was 21. 1973, Runaway, I was 22. Keep Me Alive with a band. Runaway is just me and my guitar. In fact, you know, Keep Me Alive is with a band in a studio, you know, professional studio, and everything was like, you know, we had a lot of fun and everything's on tracks, and then Mark mixed everything down and produced it and came out with what you hear, although you're going to miss a lot because of the floor noise, you know, the white noise. Runaway was not done in a studio. There's no verb on it. There's not two microphones, the guitar and the voice, none of that. It's just, I think Mark came to Jersey, and it might have been like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I just sat down and banged out the songs. I can't believe the quality of this recording, considering it's just, you know, one mic, and it's like a stage mic, a Shure mic, nothing special, but to capture my voice and the guitar, and there's no noise, I guess because it was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. But that's the update on the project with me and Mark Palladino at this point. And other than that, I've been thinking about, a couple of people were asking this question in the last live stream that I did stealth, asking about in 1 Corinthians, I think it's in chapter 11, asking about what's the deal about women covering their heads for the angels' sake, for the sake of the angels. And I explained in our last live stream that the angels, they watch believers. When believers are worshiping, when believers are together fellowshipping, when believers are in prayer or anything like that, the angels gather around with great curiosity, because now, I guess what I'm about to say is not really clarified in the word. It's my understanding after all my years of study. But they're curious because Elohim is doing something he's never done before. And you know, I have a video titled B'nai Elohim, the children of Elohim. And I think this might explain a lot of it. That video might explain a lot of this. In that he's doing something he's never done before. He's created man and incorporated evil and wickedness into man's environment. In fact, I have videos that, you know, I explain. Elohim created evil. If you don't know that, Yeah, put that in your pipe and smoke it. Chew on that one for a while. Why? Because he wants to see. Boy, you know, Brad Scott's got a lot to say about this too. And Brad, we're going to have in next Thursday's live stream, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you have questions, post them under this coming Tuesday's newscast so caregiver can grab them. But, you know, Brad explains a lot about the root and the branch and the shoots and the fruit. There are those who are the seed of Yeshua, and there are those who are the seed of Hashatan, Satan. And so anyway, you got, you know, Abba created mankind in an environment of wickedness and evil to see who, with their own free will, is going to choose him instead of the things of the world. And you know, this is a bigger deal than most people realize, because the things of the world appear to us to be everything there is, and most people think this life is it, and they want to get everything they can out of this life. Many people will do it even to the point of, you know, stepping on other people to get it, because they think this is it, this is all there is. And who, you know, who wouldn't? It's all, everything you see is, you know, we can't see anything else. And a lot of people, if they can't see it, you know, it doesn't exist. Well, that's what Elohim wants. He wants to see those who can look past that. Yeah. You know, Mark said to me, he says, Alan, he says, your talent, he says, honestly, it's even greater than I remembered it. He says, you could have had so many record deals. He says, it's really bizarre. And in fact, there are record deals he hasn't told me about yet, but he says there were a number of them that I didn't even tell you about because I knew you would reject it. Well, why? Because I was not interested in the things of this world. I never was. I can't explain it. It's nothing to do with me. It's just the way that I am, the way I always was from birth on. It's that root and the plant and the branch and the fruit. I come from a very special branch. It's the way it is. So Abba, you know, he wants to see. And he's going to take a certain group and make them echad with him. Make them one with him. Now, the angels, they're like, they can't get wrap their heads around this. No angel is equal with the Father, the Son, and the Ruach HaKodesh. Now those who are, and I think this is a special group that's taken out of those who are raptured, that are made echad, and that are from that point through all of eternity unable to sin. When people living in the millennium see these, and I believe even when most of those who were taken up in the Nechatef, the rapture, see these, and these are the ones I believe that Paul was talking about in Philippians chapter 3, verses 10 and 11, especially verse 11. Don't read it in your Bible because it'll say the same thing in verse 10 that it says in verse 11. You don't know what I'm talking about? Wait a couple of live streams when it's just me again and ask. But when people see this select group, they're going to be pointing. They're going to be looking. It's one of them. Look, it's one of them. No one has ever seen one of them before. The angels have never seen one of these. They don't understand it. No angel has ever been offered this. The ones who are being offered this are like total, to the angels, they're low lives. They're like human beings full of wickedness. Yeah, not the ones that make that choice. So the angels are watching. Now, what's the deal about a woman covering her head? If you look at the original language, this requires a lot of digging. In 1 Corinthians, where it talks about a woman covering her head, some versions say covering the power of her head, or some say the authority covering her head. It goes a lot deeper than that. It's talking about a woman who is exercising the power that she has of her own free will to cover her head and say, I am here under an authority that is higher than me. It's talking about a woman. It's not just covering her head because it's a practice of the time. It's talking about a woman who is humble enough and loves Elohim enough to know and understand the importance to him of hierarchy. And she is humble enough to say, I am lower. And the angels gather around and they look at a woman like that. And they learn from her about free will, self-control, and humility. The angels oftentimes fail in these areas. Angels are capable of sinning. Always. They are never come to a point where they're incapable of sinning. This special group is going to become incapable of sinning. These are the ones I've been talking about that I call heaven dwellers, as opposed to earth dwellers. Cover it a bit in my study in Revelation. Again, in one of the live streams in a few weeks when it's just me and caregiver, don't ask me questions when I have someone like Brad Scott on, or if I have somebody else on. When I have somebody else on, I want the focus on them. Wait until it's just me and caregiver, and then you can throw these kind of questions at me. But these are the ones who are going to be made echad with Elohim. This is like so much more than most people realize. They will become incapable ever of sinning. There's no angel that can make that claim. So, the angels are freaking out about this. And they watch believers to try and understand what it is about these special ones that Elohim is doing, because he created these creatures that are less capable than any of the malachim, the angels. They have less understanding about everything. The angels must look at us and think like we're like stupid, like little puppy dogs or something. And then they know what the Father's going to do. So they're wise, like, what is it about these? What they're going to see is that there are a very select few. Come on, my friends, how many times have I said this? The way is narrow, it's compressed, it's difficult, it's hard to find. And few are those who ever find it. There are a select few that are going to be like something the entire Malchut, kingdom of Elohim, has never seen before. 1 John 3. What we are the B'nai Elohim, and what we will be has not yet been revealed. And it's not like every Christian, every believer, you know, that churchiosity stuff. Geez, when the rapture happens, boy, you know, planes are going to be falling out of the sky. And like, you know, like 2/3 of the people on earth are going to suddenly disappear. No. Yahweh is doing something he has never done before, and that may include you. So, that's our sit down in the Word for this week. Oh, my friends, we're so close to the door. Yeshua coming. Do not allow yourself one moment of going down a rabbit hole into darkness, chasing some of this stupid stuff that's out there on the internet. Keep yourself in the Word. Abba willing, I'll see you here again next week. Until then, you know, keep your wicks trimmed. Keep your lamps ablaze. Shalom, Chavrim.